Okay guys, mabilis ang basa ng ating History of the Filipino People. Nandito pa rin tayo sa part 1, Pre-Colonial Philippines. The setting. Nandito na tayo sa the people. Continuation na to guys. The people, the Filipino belongs to a mixture of races, although basically he is a Malay. Centuries of cultural and commercial contacts with the countries of Asia and almost 4 centuries of domination by Western powers have made the Filipino comparatively sophisticated. There is in him a blending of the East and the West, so that his character exhibits curious contradictions which foreigners are apt to misunderstand. Doubtless the Filipino at the coming of the Spaniards was brown-skinned, like his Malay forebears. With the Spanish colonization, however, there appeared a kind of Filipino who was obviously the result of the not solicit relations between the conqueror and the conquered. The light-skinned and high-nosed Filipino multiplied with the coming of the American. The intermarriage between the Filipino and the foreigner, particularly the white, led to a class known as the mestizo class, also humorously called the mestizosi. In Philippine society, it is well to distinguish the types of classes In Philippine society, it is well to distinguish the types or classes of mestizos. When one says mestizo, the obvious implication is that the person spoken of is Spanish Filipino. All other half-breeds are qualified by the nationality of their parents. Thus, a Filipino with an American father or mother is called an Americanist mestizo, with a Chinese father or mother a Chinese mestizo, with an Indian father or mother an Indian mestizo, and so on down the line. Between the mestizo and the native, there has been a barrier of feeling that borders on hostility. This feeling has its origin in the late Spanish period, or more specifically during the 19th century, when the mestizo, by virtue of his social and financial status, looked down upon the native as a boor. The native naturally resented this attitude and in turn infused the term mestizo with unsavory connotations. Example: pretentious, boastful, arrogant, etc. In the mind of the native, the mestizo was insolent. His posture of superiority to the native arose from his awareness of his Spanish origins. But while thus striking a superior posture before the native, the mestizo almost always felt inferior to the pure Spaniard, who considered him so far below him as not to be taken seriously. The mestizo, therefore, during the Spanish period was Janus-faced. He was a Spaniard before a native and a Filipino before a Spaniard. The uneasy feeling between the native and the mestizo still exists, although very much watered down. It flares up once in a while, as when an eminent columnist at the height of the discussions on the American basis question early in 1959 called down a senator by claiming that the latter, being a mestizo, could not be expected to defend the rights of the Filipinos insofar as the question was concerned. Surely being a mestizo cannot be taken as an argument against the senator, but the columnist, in calling him down, merely brought to the mental surface what may be loosely termed the racial experience, that is to say, the old role of the mestizo in Philippine society and the age-old feeling of the native against the mestizo. Common traits. It is difficult, if not impossible, to define what a Filipino is, and that can be done is to pick out some traits common to the average Filipinos and to separate those that are obviously Spanish or American. The common traits are probably basically Malay and characterize the Filipinos as a people. One patent Filipino trait that immediately commends itself to the foreigner is his hospitality. All Filipinos the world over are hospitable in their own way, but Filipino hospitality is something that is almost a fault. Are you a stranger who have lost your way? Knock at the door of even the humblest rustic, and he offers you his home. In other climes, you might be suspected of being a hoodlum or opposure Consequently, you might be looked upon with suspicion, call it nabit. But the Filipino opens his heart to you, a complete stranger, and offers you the best in his kitchen and bed chamber. He makes the bed for you and asks you, usually with a proportion of apologies, to make yourself fall at home. While he, the host, sleeps on the cold floor, he prepares water for your morning ablution, waits upon you at the table, and makes life worth living for you. Perhaps you happen to drop in at an unholy hour of the day or night, sensing that you are hungry. He prepares the best food for you, ignoring the fact that there would not be enough for the next supper of his family. Meanwhile, he gives you something to while away your time. You hear him or his wife pottering about the kitchen, desperately hurrying up the preparation of the food in order not to keep you waiting. There is always a sense of urgency in his movements, for he does not want to inconvenience you. He makes you feel that he is honored by your invasion of his privacy at an unholy hour of the day or night. This hospitality to a fault has been misunderstood by many foreigners, particularly by the Spanish adventurers of the past century, who thought that such show of previous hospitality was a form of inferiority and obsequiousness. Thus, Rizal records that some Spaniards of the last century used to regale their hearers in the peninsula with tales about the Indians whose hospitality they subverted and abused, and having abused it, proceeded to tell their hearers that they fell victims to the wiles of the Filipino women. The Filipino has very close family ties. The family has been the unit of society, and everything revolves around it. The Filipino family ordinarily consists of the grandparents, the parents, and the children. The father is the head of the family, but while he rules, the mother governs. For it is the mother that reigns in the home. She is the educator, the financial officer, the accountant, the censor, the laundry woman, and the cook. But over and above the ruler and the governor are the grandparents, whose opinions and decisions on all important matters are sought. While a newborn child be baptized, the grandparents are consulted, and what they say carries much weight. Ignore them, and you raise their estranging rebuke. Is the child sick? Will you call a doctor? Well, wait a minute. The grandfather thinks an herbolario, herb doctor is enough. He has reached his ripe old age without having known a doctor. Do you think you can raise his age? Why then should you raise the life of the child by calling in somebody whose experience is limited to turning gadgets? He, an old man, does not understand. No, he will not allow his beloved grandchild to be touched by the medico. You wring your hands in sheer frustration, appeal to him in the name of modern science, and get a stern look or a verbal dressing down for your efforts. The tyranny of the elders is such that the Filipino family, in spite of the inroads of modern civilization, has remained basically the same. Respect for the elders is one Filipino trait that has remained in the book of unwritten laws. The Filipino parent exercises almost absolute powers over the children. It is unthinkable for a Filipino to do an important thing without consulting his parents. The latter do not condone children talking back not only to them but to those older than they are. The particle po may look innocent to you, but that little word shows respect for another. In no other language is respect for another carried to higher point than in the Philippine languages. Are you speaking to an older man or woman? Then use the second person plural kayo, inyo, or ninyo. You are branded disrespectful and impolite if you use the second person singular kamo or ikaw. Is the person you are talking with of your age but a stranger to you? Then use the second person plural. And don't forget the particle po. It is a sign of good breeding. Next in the degree of respect in the use of the first person plural, ate natin tayo. Here the speaker and the person spoken to are lumped together and made to appear as one. The peak of respect is achieved by the use of the third person plural sila, nila, kanila. Unlike the first two degrees of respect, this last use detachment, making it appear that the person spoken to is a far away person, someone to be handled and referred to gingerly. The elders believed and demanded they be obeyed, right or wrong. That you have a string of degrees to your credit does not impress the elders. They know for certain that your academic degrees cannot compare favorably with their experience. Yours is the knowledge, theirs the wisdom. They have drunk more water than you have. Their decision must therefore be so to all important matters that affect the whole family, for what happens to one of the members affects the rest. There is then collective responsibility in the family. It is this closeness of family ties, in particular the collective responsibility, that accounts for the late development of Filipino nationalism. For no matter how cruelly and unjustly a member of the family had been treated, the elders cautioned the victim to be patient. Remember, they used to say that not only you but all of us will suffer if you retaliate. And the poor man, realizing the consequences of his planned action, controlled his emotions, swallowed his pride, satisfied himself with biting his lower lip, and sheepishly bowed to the will of the elders. Rizal painted this common family scene during the Spanish regime in his El Filibusterismo in the chapter Cabizang Tales. Respect for the elders includes respect for the elder brother or sister. It is the responsibility of the elder brother to perform the duties of the father and mother to the younger members of the family. One finds that among Filipino families, the elder brother or sister sacrifices even his career for the sake of the young ones who must have an education. Even after his marriage, the elder brother sets aside a small part of his salary for his younger brothers and sisters. The latter, in turn, are expected to look up to their elder brother with awe and respect. Kissing the hands of parents and all relatives of neighbors as a sign of respect is extending to the elder brother or sister. Among old and respectable families, even cousins kiss the hands of their elder cousins as a sign of respect. And this brings us to that aspect of Filipino family life which is both reasonable and unreasonable. Since the collective responsibility characterizes the Filipino family, it follows that the better of member has to take care not only of his immediate family but also of other relatives. It is not uncommon to see the poor relations go to their employed kin to ask for money. This is done with such regularity that, though annoyed, the victim has to bear as much as he can with the importunities of his less fortunate relatives. To reject them is to court disaster. The poor relations will start a whispering campaign against the tight-fisted relative. If there is anything that a Filipino fears, it is the charge of being a bad relative. This custom of taking care of the poor relations is so deeply ingrained in the Filipino character that one may trace the root of graft and corruption to the closeness of family ties. Right or wrong, the family comes first and foremost. Hence, the Filipino who rises to a position of power is confronted with the problem of providing for his relative whose number, by the way, increases in proportion to the power and influence one exercises. The Filipino is naturally fatalistic. No amount of expostulation on the virtues of science or logic can dislodge him from his idea of fatalism. He believes that whatever happens to him is the work of fate. This fatalism is symbolized in the phrase, "Bahala na," a phrase that defies translation but which may be rendered loosely as "come what may." Can you go through that wall of fire? Bahala na. Are you sure you can convince him to give up his plan of leaving home? Bahala na. Therefore, anuhin ko lang to guys. Therefore, are dangers ahead. Don't be so foolish as to rush in where angels fear to tread. Bahala na. This is the last morsel we have. Where do we go? We get tomorrow's food. Bahala na. Don't gamble your last centavo. You might go home with pockets inside out. Bahala na. He is big and strong. Can you fight him? Bahala na. Such fatalism has bred in the Filipino a sense of resignation. It is thus that he faces disaster or tragedy with resignation. He appears indifferent in the face of graft and corruption. He appears impassive in the face of personal misfortune. Yet this bahala na attitude prevents him from being a crackpot. Okay, dito tayo sa loyalty to a friend bukas. Hinta na muna tayo. Dito tayo sa tomorrow, November 5. Bye everyone. God bless.